People were like, this is hip hop musical about the founding fathers. And I think it had intrigue. The energy that they brought was just incredible. I mean, it was so meaningful to people on the island, but to us also. You know, I'm proud to be part of a company that wants to be part of that change. In every aspect of Hamilton, it's about delivering a really incredible, consistent product, no matter where you see it.
Hello, Theatre Art Life podcast listeners. Today we're sharing with you the audio from our one-on-one interview series. We hope that you enjoyed listening. Some of our discussion has references to pictures shown in our webinar, so if you want to see these pictures, you can always head over to the Theatre Art Life YouTube channel and watch the replay. Enjoy.
Without further ado, I am introducing you to Frank, who is the production manager for Hamilton. So hi, Frank, and thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Wonderful. So before we get started into all of the history of Hamilton, I want you to give us a little bit of a brief about how you ended up being the production manager for Hamilton.
I started more on the stage management side, actually, and I was pretty recently graduated from NYU as Hamilton was at the Public Theater off-Broadway in New York, and they were getting ready to transfer to Broadway, and I managed to meet with the production stage manager for that Broadway production that was coming up. And we just really hit it off, and he hired me to be a production assistant, actually, for that. And through that, I met Neil Mazzella, who is my current boss and the CEO of Hudson Scenic and Hudson Theatrical Associates, where I work. And we hit it off, and as my time on the stage management side kind of wrapped up, he asked me if I wanted to consider production management. And I did. And so I went over there and have been there for about 5 years. And in that time, worked my way kind of from an assistant up. And now, because I had that relationship with Hamilton already, kind of with Hamilton as a show, and have been fortunate enough to bring all its iterations since Broadway to life.
What an amazing journey. And so were you there on that off-Broadway? Did you join the off-Broadway, or you just joined when you went on to the Broadway production?
I joined right after the off-Broadway, so through the rehearsal process and the changes process as we went to Broadway, and then through kind of our Broadway tech period and previews and all that.
What was the installation and creation of Hamilton on Broadway like? Was there a big buzz about it, and how did that go?
I think there was locally, there was a really good buzz from the off-Broadway production. A lot of people had heard about it, and it was a very small theater at the Public, so not a lot of people had actually seen it, but people were like, there's this hip-hop musical about the founding fathers, and I think it had intrigue. And by the time we got to Broadway, the buzz was pretty big, and for anyone who has followed this show, they know that the first couple of years on Broadway were completely wild. I mean, tickets were near impossible to get, and we were doing a ticket lottery. You could get $10 tickets to the show, and we'd do a live drawing every day, and 5,000-10,000 people would come every day to try and win these 22 tickets or something. And so it was a really incredible energy of something new on Broadway.
And at what point did you join Hudson Scenic?
I joined Hudson kind of right after we opened in New York. I moved over to the production management end, and I did some other shows kind of in between that, and our first out-of-town production was in Chicago. So I did a couple of shows in New York between that, kind of beefed up my production management skills before going and bringing the production to Chicago.
And for those who are not US-based, explain how Hudson Scenic interacts with a Broadway show. Like how does that sit in the running of? It's a separate company than the producing company. So how does that work?
Yeah, so kind of an interesting structure. So there's the producers of Hamilton, who then hired a general management company, Baseline Theatricals. And so they provide general management and company management services. And that general manager hired Hudson Theatrical, who I work for. So we provide the technical supervision and production management services. It's almost like we're a consultant, but we're a full-time consultant. So we do that for Broadway and all the tours, but also lots of other Broadway shows. We do it for events and arts installations, sort of anyone who needs those services, we provide that.
And that's a normal way that it works over there?
Yeah, almost always in commercial like Broadway or touring is they hire a different company. In regional theater or community theater, often the production manager is part of that company full time, but little different structure for the commercial side.
So that's kind of nice for you, because if you're hired with them full time, then you're not beholden to being just on a show and then once that show finishes having to go find another job, right? They're just going to put you on another gig that they're doing.
Definitely is nice. I mean, we all kind of work on the business development side of that. We're fortunate that in a given season we can do so many different types of projects. You know, it keeps our work really interesting.
Yeah. Interesting. So what does it take to mount Hamilton on Broadway? Tell us.
It's a pretty big production for those of you who maybe have seen it or watched the film on Disney Plus. There's not that much like moving scenery or anything, right? But we have there you go, great picture of it. So what you see there is sort of what the whole show is, right? The turntable and the ring move, and a couple of little, some lanterns and the staircase and stuff. But we don't have big set changes. We have this one really big unit set that basically we transform through lighting and through sound and through props and our imagination into the many, many spaces that are visited throughout the story of Hamilton. Broadway is a little different because we were still kind of in the creative process, right? We were working with the creative team and bringing all the different elements together. And so we were in the theater for about 2 months with that load in. Kind of, it's a permanent installation, and we were figuring out all the technical parts of it. And then we did about a month of tech rehearsals and previews before we opened. Now, when we go to other cities or we mount new productions of Hamilton, we can do the whole thing, launch a new production in about a month's time. And when we move between cities, on one of our national tours, we load the show out on a Sunday and we open on a Tuesday in a new city. So we move the 14 trucks of Hamilton quite quickly.
And so you're doing all the coordination of that moving from one location to one location, and then working with the venues in terms of how long it's going to take to get installed, etc.
Yeah, so we often years in advance we have the route booked, and there's a whole separate team of people that just work on booking our route and figuring that out. And what I do, and I'm really lucky to work with a lot of really, really good crew on our teams here who bear a kind of a brunt of a lot of the day-to-day logistics, because we have these 5 companies of Hamilton happening at the same time. But yeah, so we as a team, my head carpenters, our production staff, and myself kind of figure out, how many people are we going to need to get into each city? How long is that drive going to be? What time are we going to start? One of the things that we do on Hamilton that we're fortunate to be able to do is we have our show team, and then we have a separate advance crew. So while the show is happening in one city on Sunday night, we have a whole separate team of people that's already in the next city, and they're doing all the rigging in advance for us. They put down the show deck, the turntable, they put in the automation, they put in a lot of our electrics cable and the surround speakers in advance. Sort of all these things that are time consuming and we wouldn't be able to do basically from Monday afternoon to Tuesday night. And so between those teams, we're able to kind of make a game plan and move a really big show. I mean, what you see on tour is almost exactly what you're going to see on Broadway, which is an incredible thing to be able to bring to so many people.
John asks, you also bring in double turntables during the tours, or do you look for theaters that already have those?
We do. We do what's basically called a 4-wall rental. So the only thing we get is the 4 walls of that theater and the roof. And we bring everything else. So we bring the floor, the double revolves, all those walls you see. I mean, we bring all that, the rigging package. We bring all our own dimmers, all our own amplifiers, speakers. I mean, the whole kit and caboodle. That allows us to have a really consistent package no matter where we go.
Yeah, I think you've got some pictures, here we go, of the build here, which is quite interesting to see. So you built 5 sets basically, right?
Right. So we built 5 sets, and we built even more of the turntable and ring and decks, because that's what goes in advance to each city, but 5 full sets.
And where are these warehouses based where they were getting built?
So they're built, Hudson Theatrical, who I work, our sister company is Hudson Scenic Studio. So they're a scene shop and automation and scenic arts studio. So the sets are built up there, which is just outside of New York City in Yonkers. And then we work with Production Resource Group is our lighting and sound vendor for all this. So eventually you'll see some shots of the shop build, and that is out in Secaucus, New Jersey. We prep all that. On tour, that is a soft brick wall, which is one of our big tricks, is we have a mix of hard walls and soft walls, which still have a lot of texture because it's all about the lighting. This show, so much of the storytelling is done through the lighting. So being able to catch the texture is really important. And we did a lot of R&D with our scenic designer, David Corrins, and his team to be able to find that mix of like what's going to look really good, but also what can we do to save a truck space and installation time, which is that balance of the big hard walls and the soft kind of drops.
Right. And how much scaling up or scaling down are you doing from venue to venue? Is it minimal, or is there a lot of adaptations?
Pretty minimal. A big part of booking it is finding spaces that we can fit our kind of main footprint. We have some adaptability on how wide our show portal is and how tall our show portal is, so we can kind of help frame that picture the best way. But mostly we were able to have like a very consistent size. This is from the sound team. They were nice enough to send me some photos of all the work they captured while in their shop prep too. And so basically they will build out in advance because it's much more efficient at the shop. They'll prep all the racks for the lighting, for the sound, test all the equipment. We pre-rig a lot of the truss for all the lighting instruments. And we'll go ahead and kind of test everything there before it rolls out. So we know that when we get into the theater, we can be as efficient as possible.
That's a lot of gear.
It's a lot of gear. We have, I think, 4 trucks, including the advance of 53-foot semi trucks full of lighting and sound gear.
Let's talk a little bit and you can show us a little bit about the load in. Where is this load in?
This load in looks like it is in San Francisco, which was one of and this shot is from Puerto Rico. So some different theaters that we've loaded into.
Well, Puerto Rico is a very specific story, isn't it? Because I think there's quite a tale as to the reason, would you like to go in with the audience about why you went to Puerto Rico, how that happened, and all of the trials and tribulations of that?
Sure. For those that might not know, a few years ago, Hurricane Maria hit the island of Puerto Rico, and it was really devastating to the island down there. And almost immediately after that happened, Lin-Manuel, who wrote Hamilton, and his father is from Puerto Rico, and they have obviously big ties to the island. And so almost, days after the hurricane had cleared, they called, kind of the management team of Hamilton and said, we want to figure out a way to bring Hamilton to the island and do a big fundraiser and raise money and raise the spirits on the island. And so we endeavored on that, and we worked with a lot of amazing partners in Puerto Rico to do this. And we're able to, we renovated a theater at the University of Puerto Rico. We worked with them on their renovation to restore it, mostly just because it had so much damage from the hurricane. And we firmly believed that having an art space is important. And so we worked with them to renovate that with the plan of bringing the show to the University of Puerto Rico. It was going to be the first show that's gone there. Due to a lot of kind of complicated reasons, we ended up not using that space and went to a different theater, another theater on the island, Centro de Bellas Artes. And we did the show there, but it was a huge effort to bring the show down there, right? I mean, part of what we were doing was we wanted to make sure we weren't going to detract any resources from the recovery efforts. So we brought basically everything we needed down there. We on sea containers, we brought generators, we brought, kind of everything we would need to support the production. And we were able to raise millions of dollars with our partners around the US and around the world. But maybe equally importantly was 10 or 15,000 local Puerto Ricans saw the show for $10. And the energy that they brought was just incredible. I mean, it was so meaningful to people on the island, but to us also.
That's amazing. And this is, am I right? This is your crew that went to Puerto Rico?
Yes, this is the team from Puerto Rico, our team, as well as a lot of the local crew that had helped us throughout. And they all hold a pretty special place in my heart, and I think all of our hearts.
John asked about, can you also discuss about that sudden change of venue if there's not some things that you're not allowed to discuss, and how it affected the tour and how it affected your planning?
I think anyone who works in this industry knows that a lot of planning goes into all these things. And so for us, it'd been a year of planning to go into the University of Puerto Rico. And we had done we had done a lot of renovations. And by the time the decision was made, we'd actually loaded the whole show in. This is a picture from the University of Puerto Rico. So we were pretty much ready to go. And a lot of reasons that we ended up having to move the show. But that sort of presented a huge logistics challenge for us because it was going to be over the holidays. And so everyone kind of went home for Christmas, and a group of us pretty much worked through the entire Christmas season for about 4 or 5 days, along with a lot of people in Puerto Rico, to figure out how we were going to do it. So initially it affected us. We obviously were not going to be able to open on the same day that we thought we would be able to. But we had a pretty hard out on the other side of Puerto Rico. This production was going to San Francisco to sit down in San Francisco for a long run. So and I really got to give credit to our team, but also the local Puerto Rican team on this one. I mean, they pulled off something incredible, and we loaded out of that theater, moved to a theater we'd never been to, and did the whole thing. We only lost one show on that, and we were able to kind of make the time up, and it was a little bigger venue, so we were able to reseat everybody, get them in, and we're fortunate, to have the team and the resources to kind of throw a lot at it to make that happen. But definitely was one of the more stressful couple weeks of my life, and I think a lot of people would agree with that.
Wow, that's amazing. And then because of that tight turnaround, you had to pretty much put it on an airplane, right, and send it back to San Francisco?
Yes. One of my favorite parts of the job is figuring out the logistics, and we'll use kind of any means necessary to balance the time constraints that we're facing along with our budgetary concerns. So around the country, we mostly truck the show around the country. When we go international, there's a production in London now, and there's an upcoming production coming to Australia. We'll use sea containers, but we were in a pretty big time crunch to get from Puerto Rico to San Francisco. And so we ended up packing a lot of the show up, not the whole show, but most of it got packed up and put on a freight plane, which was a cool adventure. I'm a little bit of an aviation geek, so I certainly enjoyed getting that opportunity.
I love these photos, and I love that you were geeking out for getting to put your whole set on the UPS plane. This is my favorite picture.
They were so nice to us. They let us into the cockpit, and we were kind of there to oversee the actual loading process. It's a little different loading lighting equipment and costumes than it is your average Amazon package. So it was cool to work with them on that.
And so, I mean, did you have to tie that down? Like, how does that loading work in a plane? How did you plan for that?
A lot of people are involved in that. We work with a company called Rocket Cargo, who maybe a lot of people have heard of. They work all over the world on kind of specialized freight shipping. So everything we palletized onto air pallets, which are specially made. They go on these, you can see in this shot, there's a bunch of rollers inside the plane. Basically everything you can palletize, you do on that, and it gets netted down to be secure. And then the really big pieces, basically, as long as you can get it in and make the curve of that loading door, which we're pretty good at because we get it on and off trucks every day, it just gets tied down. So it was not that unlike loading a truck, actually.
So all your team that usually loads the truck was there to help load the plane? Is that how you worked it out?
No, actually, it was a specialized air freight team. Just did that, yeah. Our team was on their way to San Francisco. They were on a plane. They were trying to meet it on the other side.
I think that would have been fun if they'd let the crew load the plane. But yes, there's probably special ways to get that on those trucks, etc., etc. John asked how many planes we used. I think it was just one in this instance, just one.
Just one. We used a pretty large 767 for this.
And so it's the same goes for any international touring, right? So what's then the logistics of moving it across countries as opposed to around America?
Around America, so it's like I said, it's all on trucks. When we go international, we can kind of back time how long it's going to take, and we use sea containers, just a little more cost efficient and environmentally friendly than chartering big planes to fly everything around the world. So we use sea containers, and we've gotten a pretty good equivalency for how many sea containers to how many trucks to how many planes we need to move the show.
Yeah. Interesting. And so how much time did you save by using a freight plane, Kevin asks?
A lot, like over a week, basically, between loading the sea containers, getting it either down through the Panama Canal and over, or to Florida, transferred to trucks and driven over, was going to be over a week. And this was overnight, so much quicker.
Fantastic. I want to go back to a question before, just for those who don't know. So Hamilton, Rahel says, how big is the cast and how big's the tech team on the show?
Great question. The cast varies a little bit, whether it's a sit-down production or a touring production. It's like around 30, 35 actors that are on tour. And then we have 3 stage managers, 2 company managers out. And then our crew is 13 in the U.S. Pink Contracts is the crew that travels with these shows. We have 13 crew members that travel with and stay with the show. And then we bring on a local, in each city, local crew is also hired to help with the load-in as well as the run of show. And then we have an advanced team that I had mentioned earlier that helps to just move the show for all the different companies. And they're about 10 or 12 advanced team members.
I'm going to ask you your question, Matthew, so I won't forget about that. I'll come back to that. But before we get to that, I wanted you to tell us a little bit, because I'm quite fascinated as to the process of the filming of Hamilton, which many people have only seen the show through Disney Plus, and it's wonderful filming there. And I think, what was that process how did that happen, and how did they capture such a wonderful representation of the show?
For those of you who haven't seen it, it is a really special take on this production. I think they captured the excitement about that show. We kind of knew it was something really special, and we ended up filming this right after the Tony Awards, and we had won quite a few Tony Awards at that point. So the downside was it was super complicated to film right then because so many people were trying to see the show. So credit goes to our company managers for the logistics on that. But we knew we wanted to capture it, and we knew we wanted to do it in a way that wasn't just a couple of still cameras at the back. So we worked with a company called Radical Media, who they've done a lot of filming for Broadway shows. And the process, we filmed a number of live shows with audience, and we very strategically put cameras in places that wouldn't hinder the audience. I mean, they are a paying audience. We want to make sure they got the full experience. And then we also shot a number of days, or one day where we didn't have an audience. We came in and did a special shoot where we could do kind of all the shots where we had, a steady camera on stage, or we had a big crane in the audience to get kind of some of those sweeping shots. And then we'd also actually film in the afternoons before the audience came in to get even more of those sort of shots. So it was all said and done. I mean, it was less than a week of our filming time that we did it, some very long days to do it. And then someone spent a lot of time editing it, and credit goes to them for getting a really beautiful final cut. I mean, it's interesting. It's a very different, the first time I saw it, it's a different take in that you can really get close, right? You see the emotions on the actors' faces and sort of a lot of the intricacies of the dance. I mean, Andy Blankenbuehler, our choreographer, has done an amazing job with the choreography, and I've seen the show hundreds of times at this point, and I still catch new things that he's doing. I mean, the hand movements that people are doing in each song. I mean, there's always something new to see, and so a cool part of the filming is it just a new angle to see this production.
Well, I think, given the fact that it was done so well, and then now it's available around the world for those who haven't had the opportunity to see it yet in their country, I think it's amazing. And I don't know if people always have the time and the budget and the resources to get a capture like that, but it certainly has raised the bar on capturing a Broadway show and bringing it into the home. So I think, it is a credit to Radical Media. Big shout out to them. I don't know them, but I think, big shout out for them.
Oh, I was going to say, I think the other thing that was important to our producers when they did this was, Hamilton was and still is, it's expensive, right? I mean, all Broadway shows, it's expensive to travel to New York or to, even if it's on tour, to buy those tickets, right? And a big part of what our producers have done, and that we're really fortunate, is trying to democratize theater a little bit. And so in this is one way that, you have whatever it is, $7.99 or something, to have your Disney Plus subscription, and you can see the show that might cost thousands of dollars to go to in person, right? And so we believe that the story and the way the story is told is so important. And so it allows us to do that. And there's a lot of other initiatives that we are fortunate enough to do. We have a program all our productions participate in. It's called Edgeham, where we work with students in high school, and they get some curriculum from Hamilton, and they create their own pieces about American history or wherever country they are about history, and do it through poetry and music and song and dance. And then we actually invite them to come see the show at a greatly discounted rate, basically free for students who might not be able to afford it. And they come, they perform, students perform their pieces on stage with members of Hamilton, and then see the show. And I think that doing things like that, whether it's filming or whether it's those sort of programs, we're lucky to be able to do it at Hamilton, and it grows the audience base. And it, like I said, I think it's democratizing theater in a way. And that's one of the best parts of what we do.
William has a good question. He said, if you may or may not know the answer to that question, but how were cast and crew contracts and compensation handled with the filming and within and outside those performances?
Special contracts were made for both the cast and the crew that relates to compensation and rules. Everyone in the U.S. is represented by a union. And so those unions and our producers negotiated a special deal for those things. And probably something that more and more is going to come up as streaming services want to keep capturing Broadway.
Yeah. No, it's great. There's a little bit of a thread conversation about how stage management hired for the show, and Emma has answered that it's hired by the general manager. Is that generally the process of Broadway shows, that stage management's hired through general management?
The actual official hiring is always through the general manager. Who might kind of bring a stage manager into that process can come from a lot of different angles, I think. Sometimes a director has a stage manager they really love working with. They have a relationship and a working relationship, so they might bring them on. Sometimes a producer might. So on this one, the stage management team had worked with this same creative team on In the Heights. So they had a working relationship. And then now, as Hamilton has really grown, it's a really collaborative process in all our hiring. A lot of people bring a lot of talented people to the fold. So Jason Bassett, is our production supervisor who oversees a lot of kind of the continuity on the creative side. And he was our production stage manager, and now he's in that role. And so he does a lot of the work on making sure we're bringing in stage managers who work with the larger team.
On that, I guess, in terms of hiring and stuff, like we go back to Matthew's question with regards to, I haven't heard of that. We See You White American Theatre. I guess that's an initiative. Do you know about We See You White American Theatre? Can you tell us about that? And then also if there's a response on that?
I think in the last couple of months, there's been a huge focus and importance on social justice and racial equality, and particularly as it pertains in theater. There is certainly a divide or like a lack of representation, which is something that I think all of us agree needs to be fixed and worked on. On Hamilton, on stage, we have one of the most diverse casts of any Broadway show, and we're really fortunate to have that. And I think we, like basically every Broadway show and tour, and is looking at how can we also increase representation off stage and backstage. And it's something that I can't speak to in completely right now, but that we are actively working on figuring out what ways we can increase our diversity and inclusion in all facets of the industry, right? And that partly is going to be about keeping these sort of initiatives that are training people and introducing people of different backgrounds to the theater, that's really important to doing that process. But it's also, we're working really hard on our, inclusion training, doing stuff like that. And then also I'm sure if anyone follows Hamilton's social media, you'll see that we're fortunate to have producers and managers who are politically active and support these sort of causes through both what we're putting out there to the world as a show, through our social media, through where we're putting our funding. So we're not perfect, but we want to get better, and it is something that I can't tell you exactly what those things are because it's in a lot of discussion. It is something that we as a team and people above me, particularly our producers and executive producers, talk about all the time and are actively working to improve. And I'm proud to be part of a company that wants to be part of that change.
I think it's great too because it's not only just woken up that awareness in the States, but it's been a global awakening for some places as well. In Australia, and I was recently speaking to people in Spain where it's really just started to highlight that let's look at more diversity and inclusion in our arts. And unfortunately, historically, that hasn't always been the case. So we have to really work hard to undo those biases that exist within our industry.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing. Oh my gosh, we've got lots of questions here, so I better. AJ, I think you did say it, but how many nights did you film the show to capture the televised version?
I think we filmed 3 with an audience, 3 nights with an audience, plus a special day of no audience special shots.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of people on our call that are not necessarily in the States as well. So excuse us if we're asking questions that people in America might know. But Jenna asked, I don't know where you're from, Jenna, but what's the difference between company managers and production managers, and do these roles and responsibilities ever overlap?
The company managers are there's one assigned or multiple assigned to each tour or production of Hamilton or of any Broadway show or tour. And they are doing a lot of the hands-on management of it. So they actually do the payroll, the actual administration of payroll. They work with the theater and settle the box office. So they do a lot of the financials, and in some ways a lot of the HR part of it too. They're helping to figure out people's housing if they're on tour, their travel, all that kind of stuff. So they have a really wide-ranging, very challenging job. A lot of respect for my company management colleagues. We, as production managers, tend to focus a little bit more on the technical and logistics of the show. So we work with the shops to figure out, find the right pricing, figure out efficiencies and how it's actually going to get built, and then figure out, how many days do we need to load this into the theater? How many crew members do we need to run the show? So it's a little bit of a difference in your day-to-day. We work together a lot, particularly as it pertains to the financials of a show, but our actual day-to-day responsibilities differ in those ways.
Dylan asks, as Hamilton has visited so many cities, what are some of the largest challenges that differ from each theater/city or region?
The biggest one tends to just be the physical differences between a theater. So some theaters have 4 great loading docks and it's a straight shot to the stage, and some you have to unload on the street and go around a corner and get into a space that's much, much smaller, right? And so it can be that can be challenging to figure out how are we going to approach this load in, this load out, the actual layout of the show separately. And so that's definitely been a big challenge. I mean, we face various weather challenges, all those sort of things. We're lucky to, for the most part, work with really great crews no matter where we go. And so their local knowledge and understanding how they've approached whatever their challenges before is really important, and leaning on our local partners is important.
So explain how when you're going internationally, what is the team that's involved to moving it to that country, and what's sourced locally in terms of the show?
It can vary a little bit depending on various circumstances, but there is a local team for London, and there will be a whole local team for Australia. Actually, not that many people will end up going. So creative staff will go to those countries to help guide the creative process. From my end, I kind of work with our partner in London or in Sydney, who's going to be the local production manager and manage the day-to-day, particularly as Australia is going to tour to some other cities. Having someone there who knows that market. So we work with them and kind of do a handoff of knowledge, and they've come and watched me load in a show and seen the process, and then we'll provide a lot of the, we kind of have a handbook at this point of this is how you make a Hamilton. So we'll hand off a lot of that data to them so that they can duplicate it and create a really consistent production. And then as needed, team members will go to those places to help. Again, it's kind of just like a handoff of knowledge, right? We've been fortunate.
You've got a lot of plans here that I can kind of show as well. We see.
Yeah, so there's a lot of detailed drawings about how this works, and so yeah, it's a partnership with those international productions in all fronts.
What is the plan, given the fact that so it's over in London? Obviously, we've got COVID. So what's the future of Hamilton in terms of where is it going? What are the plans moving forward? What are you doing right now? What's happening now?
Yeah, we're still on track to open in Sydney this coming in 2021, and everything is, I think, like everyone in the world, we're watching the data, we're watching local regulations to see what it is. When it's safe to do so, we will be opening as expeditiously as we can. Hamilton intends to have our companies out on tour again as soon as it's safe to do so. Those in the States maybe have seen that Broadway is not planning to reopen until the end of May next year, which is certainly a hard pill to swallow. But we're, the demand for the show is there, and we think it's still an incredible product that people are hopefully going to want to see as soon as it's safe to do so. So we'll be back out there, and we'll be doing shows again soon, I hope.
Katie asked, now that there's so many productions out there at once, is there ever a collective production meeting, or how do you work collectively as teams, or are you sort of letting them go out there and do their own individual section, or are you ever meeting together?
A little of both. We pretty rarely ever meet in the same physical space, but thanks to the magic of Zoom and conference calls, different teams do different levels of inter-company coordination. General managers, there's a certain number of us that work on all the productions, and we're kind of tasked with ensuring that consistency. So I'm lucky to work with a production carpenter, electrician, sound, props, wardrobe, and hair, who oversee their own teams on each of these productions. And they help to make sure that there is a consistent product amongst their teams. And that group of people, as we work together, are able to kind of coordinate all those activities across all the companies, or if we're going to implement a change, make sure it's implemented across the companies. I know company managers do pretty regular calls amongst themselves to make sure they're doing the same thing about implementing things the same. Like I said, in every aspect of Hamilton, it's about delivering a really incredible, consistent product no matter where you see it. So there is some of that. On the flip side, I'm not a micromanager, just in my own style, and I'm fortunate that our teams on the ground in each of these productions are just so good at what they do, and I pretty much trust them implicitly to make the right decisions. Like, they're the ones who are living with that production and what they're doing every day, and they're really good at knowing when they need to make a decision to get something done versus when they want to kind of call their production person or call me or whoever and do stuff. So it's a collaborative effort in that way.
What's the logistics of having the show shut down? And some of them, I guess, would have been pulled out of the theatres. Are they sitting in storage somewhere? Like, where are they? And are there any still sitting there with is the Hamilton set still in its theatre in New York? And what's the maintenance and servicing on that, given that it's still all set up?
Yeah, actually, most of our shows are still sitting in their theaters. One of them, we got out of a theater. It's sitting in a warehouse. But most are sitting in theaters either we didn't feel it was safe to load out at the time, or we anticipate reopening in that theater when the time comes. And the initial phases are kind of make everything safe, disconnect power, make sure haze and fog are disconnected and stuff like that. Cover props and costumes to avoid dust and critters. And now it's about just kind of regular check-ins with our venue partners or with crew members that are, local to the area, to check in. As we all know, theaters are old. Sometimes water drips or things, things happen in theaters. So it's about just checking in on everything, making sure there's no damage. With, obviously our goal is to be able to come back and do a period of time where we check everything out and get our cast back up, back comfortable on the set and with all the cues before we open, with minimal amount of having to do like significant rework when we get back. So just making sure everything is safe is important.
And what is that rough time frame in terms of, is it, with cast and tech and everything, is it going to be like 6 weeks? Is it going to be 4 weeks? Or have you planned it yet?
we have not really planned it yet, beyond, acknowledging that we're going to talk with our, there's going to be a lot of stakeholders as we come back, right? And we want to make sure everyone's comfortable. So it's going to be enough time that the tech team feels good about getting back in that, and the actors, much like the actors, right? The doing something repetitively helps them to do it really consistently well, and to have walked away for what might be a year plus. Everyone's going to need that chance to get back, and then it's going to be about just getting people comfortable with whatever safety precautions are going to be taken, and that's going to be paramount. And so we have not set a timeline on what the return is going to look like, other than to say we're going to make sure to get input from a lot of people to make sure we can do it safely.
And on that, I think that, given the fact that you're going to so many different locations and what the COVID safety precautions or safety measures are in each place, location, country, state might differ, are you going to set like a procedure that's going to meet all the shows are going to adhere to, or are you going to have to sit there and work locally? Because it's not just the show, right? It's your guys and their load in and all of the aspect of people getting the show set up. So it's kind of an overwhelming task. I think you'd probably have to set something that would be consistent for you as a crew to do. Is that the plan, or what's your thoughts on that?
Our plan is to create a protocol that we can use kind of wherever he goes. So probably adhering to sort of the most stringent regulations that we anticipate meeting, and being able to implement that in any city that we go to.
John asked a question. He says he's heard of swings flying from one city to the other, just for special cases. Are you responsible for coordinating those swings, or is that somebody else?
Somebody else. And while it happens, it's pretty rare. We're fortunate to have swings and understudies that stay with each company full time. It does happen on rare occasion if something, weird scheduling blips. But I don't. That actually mostly is coordinated through stage management and company management.
Liz asked an interesting question, and it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that. How do you see the success of Hamilton progressing into the rest of the world, given that it's such an American history story?
Yeah, I was sort of interested when we went to London what the reaction would be, and having had the opportunity to sit there and watch it with that London audience. Really incredible. I think what's interesting is some of the things that we find, like we get a good laugh in America. We didn't get as good of a laugh in the UK, but some other items we got a much bigger laugh. They really love King George. So it's a little bit of a different viewpoint that the audience is watching it through. But I think the merits of the show stand on their own, whether the American history or not. The entertainment part of it and the kind of incredible storytelling that happens sort of can go outside of an American audience pretty easily, we found. So we're excited to see it play in Australia for sure, and hoping to have similar reactions. A lot of people are very excited, so that's a great sign.
Yeah, well, let's see. We've got some Aussies on the call, so we'll have to see what they think when they get to see it in Australia. And I think having watched it online, it is a universal and interesting story. And then also on the back end of that, a lot of people around the world have been watching American films and reading American literature. So we are not strangers to American history in that sense, I guess, in terms of some of the historical movies that have been out, So I think it's not a huge leap to jump into that realm. Jenna, sometimes things don't go as planned or as expected. So how do you respond to that? How do you remain calm and focused in times of, I'm sure you had a few at Puerto Rico. So how do you deal with stressful situations?
Yeah, things don't go as planned a lot, unfortunately. But I think part of what I am, like, I'm a planner, so I very much like to sit down and say, okay, these are the new realities that we're facing, and what do we need to overcome these obstacles, A, B, and C. And then I really am fortunate to be able to lean on a team of people that just have a lot of experience in what they do. I never claim to be like a subject area expert in almost anything that I'm doing. I'm not a world-class rigger, and I'm not a world-class sound mixer. I think I saw one of our sound mixers is on this call. Hi, Kevin. And they just know a lot more than I do about their individual things. So when something goes awry, it's incredible to be able to turn to your people and say, what do you think about this? What do you think is the best way to overcome this? And what I am able to do, or what my job is to be able to synthesize all that information and help guide us to an outcome or a decision that will do it. So for me, I would say leaning on my team and big plan of making like step-by-step plans.
I'm a planner too. I identify with that, Frank. All the contingencies. Zoe asked a question. I think it's more personal, so it's a good one to slowly wrap up, because we've only got an hour with you today. With the extra time that we have right now, what are you particularly interested about, passionate about, and are you finding other ways to do things? Are you applying that to your work? What are you doing through this time?
Yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed this silver lining of having some extra time to reconnect with family and spend extra time with them that I might not have normally got. I'm a runner, so I've enjoyed being able to run every day and do stuff like that. But I'm also taking this time to, I've also worked, outside of theater. I've worked on political campaigns before as like an actual production person. But I've taken this time to be able to volunteer and do some more political work, which I've enjoyed. I don't always have time when we're working crazy long hours to support causes that we're passionate about. So kind of doing all those things and enjoying a lot of the great outdoors.
Yes, because you're in Colorado, right?
I'm in Colorado, so I'm enjoying my hiking and all that stuff.
Wonderful. And what do you think should we do better when we come back from this pause in the industry? Like, what is it that, we can, diversity is one of them, so that's
100%.
We've got to tick that box. But is there other aspects of the industry you think should be improved and looked at while we've got the opportunity?
Yeah, I think this will be a chance for us to all remind ourselves of the importance of safety and ways that we can make the industry safer. And I think that'll be something that's exciting to come back and see how we do it. I also, hope, and I don't have a solution for it yet, but I hope that it gives us a chance to re-examine our work-life balance a little bit. And, I think one of the really hard things in doing commercial theater, but, big events, any of this, is we work really long hours. We work weird schedules. We travel a lot. And hopefully we can find some ways, we've all developed these, ways of having meetings and doing work and stuff in new ways. And hopefully that means we can continue to allow people to figure out, just a healthier work-life balance, and people can support their families still, but also spend more time with them.
Mm. Grace says that, do you think there's a culture of overwork and burnout in the industry in the USA? And she's just done a dissertation about it in Irish theatre. How fascinating.
Oh, all right.
I want you to send that to me. I want to read it.
Yeah, I'm interested to know what you think. But I think I don't know that it's so much. Yeah, I guess I would say that there's certainly a culture in the theater world, the commercial theater world, of working really long hours and who can get through the hardest week, and sort of wearing it as a badge of honor. And sometimes that's just what it takes to get the job done. It can certainly just be stressful on a person to work the kind of hours that we work.
Yes, Grace, please email it to us. Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing. That's a kind of a global, the arts, people who work in the arts are often overworked and underpaid as a general group. We don't necessarily go into it for the reasons of making big bucks, because that would be silly. And I think it tends sometimes with corporate, they take advantage of that passion, and you work really hard and long hours. So I think that is one of the biggest things that we should all be looking at as we go back into the world of work. And I agree with you that balance. Being able to have lunch with my kids has been a blessing for the last 6 months, mate. Okay, John had another question. Is there a dream this is a good one. Is there a dream production that you want to work for, like after Hamilton? Because like Hamilton's kind of one of the biggest Broadway shows. Yeah. Is there something else you want to do?
I love doing new shows. Like I love the challenge of new shows. So that's always good. I think maybe a little outside the theater world, I would love to do like a big like Olympic opening ceremony or something like that, which is just next level in terms of scale. So maybe someday.
Yeah. You got to get to Japan first, get that one rolling, and then you can get on the team, right? So Deanna asks, and this is another good question, what advice would you give to somebody who's looking to get into the industry right now and is just coming out of college or is still in college? If you got any advice as what they should be doing?
I think now is maybe a great time to reach out to some people or companies that you admire. I mean, people have a little more free time than they might otherwise. So, grab a playbill and flip to the staff pages and say, this is a show I really love. I really love the lighting design. I really love the way the automation works, whatever you're passionate about, and figure out who did it and reach out to them. I find that people kind of on our side of the world are more than happy to talk to young people who are excited about this industry and excited about being a part of it. And now is a great time to start making those connections.
I would totally concur with that. Look, Frank, thank you so much for chatting with us today. I really appreciate the insight and the stories that you had to tell about Hamilton. And is there any final words you want to tell the gang that have been watching today?
Thank you so much for joining. It's a weird time in the world right now, but I have no doubt that theater and events and all these things are going to come back, and it's going to be better than ever. So hold out. It's a hard time, but we'll be back.
Please write a review on our podcast whenever you listen to our podcast. Let your friends know about us. You can learn more about Theatre Art Life by visiting our website at www.theatreartlife.com. And you can follow us on social media and leave your questions or comments on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Twitter, or YouTube. We really want to thank David Zaya for composing the music for our podcast, and Michelle Sharotta, who is our sound engineer. We are your hosts, Anna and Anna, and this is the Theatre Art Life podcast, where we put the spotlight on those who create live entertainment around the world.